Okay, so slight confession to make for someone who's slightly obsessed with the Metal Gear lore, and also for someone who spent way too many hours replaying these games throughout my life. There's one title that I've been avoiding for a long time, literally 9 years at this stage, and that's Metal Gear Solid 5. However, I finally got around to replaying the game 9 years later. Ironically, just as long as Venom Snake's Coma, and it's actually better than I remember it being, in particular around the original idea and story that Kojima was trying to deliver. And I suppose maybe I misunderstood some of it back then, but I actually have some fresh eyes in it now, and I actually really enjoyed it. But maybe just first to add some context as to why I'm so obsessed with the series. It's just the twists, the turns, the conspiracy-driven madness that's behind it, and the way Kojima has built this universe. And the other thing is, it's frighteningly close and relevant in 2024 to what's actually happening across the world. Now, before I just get further into my actual thoughts about the story, I just want to briefly speak on the gameplay. I know the open world elements to Metal Gear Solid 5 is slightly off-putting for original fans of the series, but as a game, as a stealth game, action game in its own right, it's a ton of fun and it's really, really addictive. But I found myself more being okay with a lot of the waiting in MGS5. Maybe more to the fact is I was more excited to experience the story than I was previously. Again, going into it with fresh eyes and non-judgmental eyes, I suppose. And I suppose maybe the primary issues I had originally when I played this game was twofold. One was the fact is Snake voice, first and foremost, when I found out it was being replaced, so David Hayter was no longer going to be the voice of Solid Snake, and it was going to be Kiefer Sutherland. I already went in with predetermined bias as to how I felt about a new actor playing as Snake, or what I originally thought was Big Boss. And let's get to that in a few minutes. However, I was annoyed. I had played Snake Eater. I had expected to hear Big Boss as David Hayter because I kind of grew up with this. And when I was just annoyed, I was just annoyed at facing the prospect of just not hearing his voice in the game. And, you know, as I said, I went in with a predetermined bias. And again, I was already thinking negatively, even before I had actually experienced the game. Then the second issue, and probably one of the biggest issues for people, was the rumors started to circulate as the game came to release that you didn't actually get to play as Big Boss, but as a phantom in itself, as part of the name. And I wanted to deny that, and I denied myself that in my head as I played through the game. I wanted to be Big Boss. I didn't want to play as a different character, and that frustration kind of built up in me as well as I played through the game. However, I kind of finally understand the context as to why that decision was made. Look, here's the thing. I've always had this weird, complicated relationship with Metal Gear Solid's bait and switch moments. I struggled with MGS2 because I suppose the wait for MGS1 and 2 was long, protracted, and obviously it went through a console generation. And it's just that moment when I realised I wasn't playing Solid Snake for most of the game. It pissed me off as well, and this kind of took me back to that in a way. But funnily enough, in the future, and now how I feel about MGS2 is I actually think it's one of the best games in the entire series. And now I kind of see a similarity in MGS5, in that whole bait and switch moment is there as well. But when I've replayed the game and experienced Venom Snake's story, his whole suffering, and it's just much more appealing to me than it was when I previously played it. Look, Kojima has always been a little bit eccentric, and it's always about playing with perception for the player. And it was just making me question the nature of identity and power and just the truth behind Phantom Pain. And I've just kind of come to a realization it just wasn't about Big Boss at all. It was just about creating a legend like Big Boss, as in involving the player directly in that kind of creation of that myth and hero type character that you get to kind of become. But you also suffer, and I suppose you see Venom Snake suffering and you feel it, and in particular around the last couple of segments where, yeah, spoiler alert, you have to execute a lot of your compatriots basically because they're infected with a particular infection in their language or voice. And that part was particularly impactful when I actually replayed it. And I actually didn't want to kill them. I didn't want to kill my compatriots, but I had to progress the story.
I'm sorry, boss.
Now, lastly, I just want to speak on if everyone can remember, the discourse around the game feeling unfinished. And everybody that has played the original game and beaten the original game will be familiar with the infamous Mission 51 that got cut. Now, whether it got cut for DLC purposes or obviously the whole issue with Kojima and Konami falling out and everything being over budget, personally, I just forgetting about that. I don't really care anymore. But on this playthrough, I kind of let go of that idea as well. And in reality, the story actually does feel complete. It actually right up until the insane last mission. And the fact is, it just leads you up to Intrude N313, which is essentially the showdown, and brings us up to the original Metal Gear. And I used to be convinced previously that we needed that cut mission to finally kind of wrap up the story, in particular around Liquid Snake, but I'm not really sure anymore. In the end, Phantom Pain, I think its conclusion is brilliant in its own right. It just kind of leaves you with the weight of the entire journey, the cost of what it is to become a legend, and the toll it has taken on Venom Snake. And again, I think Kojima, when looking back on it in reality, has managed to flip my expectations, similar to what he's done with Metal Gear Solid 2. And I have to admit, this game has aged far, far better than I originally thought. Anyway, folks, I don't know if people agree with me. Let me know what you think about Metal Gear Solid 5 down in the chat. Do you agree with my thoughts now? Did you feel similar like I did back in the day? Share your comments down below. Have I gotten this wrong? Let's just get talking. If you're new to the channel, please consider supporting my work by liking and subscribing, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.